Good morning. Welcome to day 25 of the Chad Daybell trial. On disorder in the court, I decided to start my stream a little bit earlier. This is the last witness of being put on by the prosecution, and it appears to be I just looked at it real quickly. It's Agent Hart, who's been on the stand before. It is apparently going to be a short day of testimony. It's just going to be this witness, and probably they're going to end, so the state is going to rest after this witness, and they will probably go home for the day after this. So let's go ahead and just get into it. What do you say?
Agent Hart, can you remind the jurors where you currently work?
At the present time, I'm the chief deputy for the Canyon County Sheriff's Office.
And where did you work before that?
Prior to that, I was an FBI agent for 27 years.
Good morning, dear.
And when you were with the FBI, did you become involved in a case involving some missing children named Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow?
Yes, I did.
Did you personally assist in that case or work on that case?
Yes, I've worked on the case since its inception in November of 2018. Or 19, excuse me.
And can you explain why the FBI came to be involved in that particular case?
Good morning, Johnny.
Yes, it's a very common occurrence for the FBI to be asked to assist in cases involving missing children. Of course, when those cases come to us at the onset of the case, we don't know what has happened. There could be elements of those cases.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. This has become a narrative.
Overruled. There could be elements of those cases that would, at a future date, indicate a federal prosecution. And so we're brought in early to assist our city and county partners, and that assistance continues through the entirety of the investigation.
Prior to being involved in this case, had you worked on cases involving missing children?
Several.
With regard to this case, did the FBI follow up on leads?
Yes, there were a tremendous number of tips and leads that were received during the course of this investigation. Those leads that involved information out of the state of Idaho were primarily handled by the FBI, and those tips and leads that were within the state were generally handled by the Rexburg Police Department or the Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
In this case, let me back up. Is it common in a case with missing children to look at the parents?
You look everywhere. You cannot have blinders on as a case develops. You have to follow the evidence and follow all of the investigative measures and leads that exist. And that's the process. Sometimes parents are involved, but you don't automatically look to any one individual at the onset of a case.
And is that in fact how the investigation proceeded in this case?
Yes.
Are you aware if other specialists or other branches, I may be using the wrong term, other areas of expertise within the FBI became involved in this investigation?
Absolutely, several did. The FBI possesses individuals and units that have particular skill sets that oftentimes can't be replicated due to resources by a city police department or a county sheriff's office. And so in this case, we had forensic accountants, we had electronic cellular telephone specialists, we had the FBI lab, we had our evidence response team, we had analysts. so on and so forth. Each of those individuals or units have a particular expertise and skill set that were brought to bear in this case as our needs dictated.
Good morning, Claudia.
And Your Honor, I'm going to ask if I can be handed State's Exhibit 170.
Very well.
I expect a smaller crowd today because there's a big, there's a highly anticipated testimony going on in Karen Reed trial today. Colin Albert cross-examination is going on. They're on a break right now, but there's a huge amount of traffic in that area right now. And I watched a part of it, but as you know, this case has my heart.
Agent Hart, as part of your work with the FBI, did you work on reservations?
I did. I have spent approximately 14 years of my career, either full-time or part-time on various different Indian reservations.
And with that, did you deal with any kind of burial sites?
Yes, when you're assigned to an Indian reservation, there are specific trainings that you go through in preparation for the types of cases that you might see. One of those trainings is the identification of clandestine grave sites, as well as how to process and exhume clandestine graves.
We talked about you being involved in the search for some missing children. Were you also involved in recovering their remains?
I was present on June 9th and June 10th of 2020 for the search warrant that was executed at Chad Daybell's property, where we located the remains of JJ and Tylee.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask to be allowed to publish State's Exhibit 170C, D, E, and H,
All right, can
one
you,
at a time.
with Exhibit 170, what does that entail in total?
The Exhibit 170 runs from 170A to 170U. And then there are some additional portions of it. The packet or the portion that I'm focusing on deal with images taken from the body recovery site.
Okay, and that's an admitted exhibit, correct?
It is.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification there. So you've requested 170C, D, and H?
E and H.
Okay, those may be published.
Thank you. And Agent Hart, I believe there may be a pointer up there if it's helpful with your testimony.
Got it.
And for the record, I'm currently publishing C. Agent Hart, can you tell us if there's anything within this image that you noticed when you were on scene?
Yes, I think there's some better photographs, but this is a photograph of the location of JJ's burial, which you can see kind of in this area.
And I'll move now to State's Exhibit 170D. And when you said there were some photos showing it a little bit better, is this one of those?
Yes, this demonstrates what we look for when we're searching for a clandestine grave site. One of the telltale signs is a change in the plant growth that's fairly distinctive. So you can see consistency all around, but in this rectangular area here. You have a different color of plants, as well as just some lack of growth. And so as you look, you can see a fairly distinctive area here. And this is what I observed as we were doing our initial survey of the property.
And now publishing 170E. Does that show anything additional?
It's just a closer demonstration of the a pretty specific line. And as we felt in the dirt, you could actually feel a seam where the sod had been taken up. And again, just an indication that that may be an area where digging has taken place, which proved to be true.
And when you talk about you can actually feel, do you mean with your hand?
Yes.
And now publishing 170H. And do you recall what is in this image?
Yes, as we were walking the property, we have probing sticks, and that's a way to push a rod into the earth. On that spot where we've shown the different growth, I couldn't penetrate that area with a probing rod. And as we took up the first layer of sod, we found a board and rocks, which is what I was hitting with the rod as I was attempting to probe that site.
And again, that's something that you had done previously in your career?
Yes, I've had specific training for that. And prior to that time, I had personally been involved in search warrants with the exhumation of burial sites.
And once those things were removed, what was found underneath those?
JJ's body.
Poor little JJ's body.
After the recovery of the children's bodies, at any point, did you attempt to speak with the Daybell children?
Yes, myself and another agent went over to their residence, which is kitty corner to the Daybell property, on the evening of June 9th, and spoke with them at length about what was taking place.
Was it your understanding initially that they would agree to speak with you?
That's the request that I made to them. We explained that we had some things that we wanted to tell them and talk with them about, and asked if they would sit down and meet with us.
At some point, did they decline to meet with you?
Initially, they agreed to meet with us. And then the following day declined to keep that appointment after speaking with Chad Daybell.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. There's no foundation to suggest that information. I'm going to move to strike.
It's overruled.
Agent Hart, as part of the investigation, and I think we've talked about this before, but did you review some iCloud data?
I spent well over 100 hours reviewing iCloud data, yes.
Do you recall what iCloud accounts those were?
There are two. There's one entitled Lori for Style at iCloud.com, and the second is called Lolly Time at iCloud.com.
And who were those accounts ultimately associated with?
Both of those accounts were registered to or subscribed to Lori Vallow.
And in going through those, was that a significant amount of information?
It's a tremendous amount of information, tens of thousands of text messages, multimedia messages, voicemails, thousands upon thousands of photographs, videos, emails, everything that you would find on a modern smartphone. The iCloud is simply a cloud storage device for all of that content.
And in preparation for your testimony today, did you prepare an exhibit?
Yes,
Do you believe that exhibit would assist you in testifying today?
it would.
Do you believe the exhibit would assist the jurors in understanding your testimony?
I do.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand to the court what's been marked as Exhibit 183B. I will note there are printouts of a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint or the exhibit itself is actually contained within Jump Drive.
All right.
And with the printout, I do have a courtesy copy for Your Honor as well as counsel and one for the court.
Thank you.
And if I may have the witness handed a copy of 183B, the printout.
And Judge, could we have a sidebar, please?
Yes. There's a evidentiary ruling the court is going to need to take up on the record, but outside the presence of the jurors. I think this will be a quick argument in lieu of a break here. If we could just have the jurors line up in the hall, please. And we'll go on the record with the objection. Once the objection's resolved, the jurors will come right back in.
All right, wait.
Perfect. All right. Well, we get to fast forward because
The
I
state's
started a little later.
proposed exhibit 183B. Defense has an objection at this point, and I found it's proper to take it up outside the jurors' presence so that any reference to what may not come in would not be heard by them. So, Ms. Blake, perhaps if you give additional foundation of what the proposed exhibit is, and then I'll hear any objection from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. The exhibit is content from the iCloud accounts associated with Lori Vallow, that Lori for Styles and Lolly Time. Both of those are stipulated to exhibits, meaning the entire content has been stipulated to come in. This particular proposed exhibit is excerpts directly from those accounts, I believe mainly from the Lolly Time account. This was turned over to defense counsel at the end of January as a proposed exhibit. There was a few modifications made and the modified version was provided to counsel. However, the modifications made included removing 3 slides in their entirety. There were no other additions or changes made at all to the exhibit. So given that, that's just what the exhibit is.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Mr. Pryor, is there an objection from the defense?
Judge, the objection is not the admission of the exhibit. The objection is that counsel throughout this trial has had a repeated course of action of providing me summaries either late the night before the testimony is to incur or the morning of or late in the evening on, again, the day before. I'm not objecting to the admission of the emails from Lolly Time. In fact, that was a stipulation of the parties that those be admitted. What I am asking for is an opportunity to ensure that what Ms. Blake is representing doesn't contain anything outside of what was stipulated to. And the fact that I got an email, I believe it was last night or the night before, that there were modifications made to this. I want to ensure that those modifications are as they were represented, and I ought to be afforded that opportunity.
All right, Ms. Blake, to be clear then, the modifications were taking things out of the proposed exhibit, not adding things in. Is that correct?
Correct. None of the remaining slides have been modified or altered in any manner from what was turned over in January. The only modifications were the removal of 3 slides.
Okay. Well, considered the objection here then. First, expressly was indicated there's not an objection to the admission of the exhibit. So with that and it being offered, the court will admit exhibit 183B. In terms of the timing, while I understand it's certainly difficult in the middle of trial to be dealing with any modifications because this involved the taking out of some information, not adding it in. I think the court could presume that defense counsel has had an opportunity to review that. So I'll have it now that it's admitted. It may be published. However, if during the course of publishing you see something that doesn't seem to comport with your understanding of the exhibit, Mr. Pryor, you are allowed to make an objection, and I would ask the state be ready to stop publishing on quick notice if an objection comes up.
The state has no problem with that, Your Honor.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. And I'll note also then this would be a summary exhibit under Rule 1006. Is that how the state's offering it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Hi, Grandma
Okay,
Sherry.
well,
Hi,
the
Rachel.
exhibit's admitted then, and with the objection resolved, we'll have the jurors return for additional evidence.
Johnny, they probably think, hey, truth matters. They probably think, oh, we have to save his life. He's our
Court notes
beloved
that exhibit
father.
183B has been admitted, and you can continue with direct, Ms. Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would request to publish 183B.
You may publish.
I believe the court has the original jump drive if you would like me to publish from that.
All right, we'll get that submitted.
Does this appear to, in fact, be the exhibit created by you?
It is.
And Your Honor, I'm going to pause here to allow the jurors to read.
Very well.
It says, from Lori, I'm finding some great stuff about you. I'm going to do some sealings. Can't wait to share all the things I learned about you. Wow, you're going to like it. It explains a lot. Okay, hurry up, please, says Alex. And then Lori says, going to check everything with my source tonight to make sure I got this all right, but it's really good. We can talk about it tomorrow, hopefully. So that was Lori and Alex talking to each other.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate who these messages were being sent from and who these messages were being sent between?
These are messages between Lori Vallow and her brother, Alex Cox.
And can you read the date of these messages into the record?
These three messages are from March 20th of 2019.
When we look at these particular messages, what about them caught your attention?
Alex Cox was a figure during the course of our investigation, and what caught my attention about this particular interaction between Lori Vallow and Alex Cox is in line 1837 that Lori Vallow had to check everything with her, quote, source to make sure she had her information correct, but that it was really good.
Did this indicate to you that Lori herself didn't have this information?
Yes, that's why I think it's significant.
And did you also see in here that Lori was then going to pass that information on to Alex?
Yes,
Did you learn through the investigation who Lori's source was?
Foundation.
Sustained.
This is the conspiracy, you all. This is where
Through
we
the
see conspiracy.
investigation, did you see messages from Lori to Chad quite frequently?
very frequently.
In those messages, was she oftentimes requesting information?
Yes.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad to Lori. I have been instructed to focus my efforts on Hillary, so I will. From Lori to Chad, okay, find out her percentage for me and JJ's. Chad says, she is at 0.13. I turned up the pain to 10 and placed a spiritual virus on her. She is at 99.99. Raphael visited him and told him to follow Amy into the light. I also assured him that James would love and take care of his mommy, which he will with all of his heart and soul. And then Lori says, that is sweet. I miss you desperately. I think Hillary is Tylee and Raphael. I don't know. I don't want to say who those people are, but they will talk about. This is so gross. This is them literally talking about.
And Agent Hart,
killing
would
people.
you indicate the date these were sent into the record?
Yes, these four text messages were sent on July 18th of 2019.
What had happened 7 days prior to these messages?
Lori Vallow's husband, Charles Vallow, had been shot and killed.
Murdered.
Through your investigation, did you learn who Hillary was a reference to?
Yes,
And who was that?
Tylee.
Right.
And there's also a name in here, Raphael. Did you learn who Raphael referred to?
Raphael is a name, another name used by Chad Daybell between he and Lori Vallow very frequently throughout the course of their communications.
And also a name, James. Do you know who that referred to?
Yes, that is another name for Chad Daybell as referenced in the James and Elena communications between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
And did you learn who Amy was in reference to?
I could not find out specifically who Amy was.
What about this series of messages stood out to you?
There were three very critical components to these messages.
Can we go through them one by one, please?
Yes.
What was the first one?
The first is line 2667. This is a text that is initiated by Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow, indicating that he has been instructed to focus his efforts on Tylee Ryan.
And what was the second thing that stood out to you?
The second thing is present in the following two lines, 2665 and 2660. Lori Vallow makes a reference to Chad Daybell or a request to find out her, meaning Tylee Ryan's percentage, as well as JJ's percentage. That word is referring to the death percentage for Tylee Ryan and JJ.
Judge, I'm going to object. Calls for speculation. Move to strike.
Overruled.
In fact, in subsequent texts, the
Judge,
exact,
I'm going to object at this point. Non-responsive. There hasn't been a question.
Sustained.
Agent Hart, you were explaining why those lines stood out to you. Could you please continue your explanation?
the words death percentage are used in subsequent texts. This series of text messages is the first in a series of texts that will take place over the next 3 weeks between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Conspiracy.
In those text messages, in varying degrees of detail, they refer to the death percentages of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy. Those text messages over that course of 3 weeks.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's again becoming a narrative.
Sustained.
And what course of time or what period of time did those messages cover?
Approximately 3 weeks.
And when we look at that line 2660, there's reference to specific percentages, it appears.
Yes.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Again, this is a message from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow wherein he is indicating his death percentages for Tylee at 0.13 and for JJ at 99.99, which follows with a reference that Raphael or Chad Daybell had visited JJ and told JJ to follow Amy into the light, which is a common reference for death.
In this particular message, there's also a reference to turning up the pain to 10. Who said that again?
Chad Daybell.
And also a reference to placing a spiritual virus in her. Who said that?
Chad Daybell.
And then in that last sentence, did anything about that stand out to you?
Well, line 2660 is a specific conversation regarding the deaths of Lori's children.
Judge, I'm going to object. That's calling for speculation in the conclusion, and I'm going to move to strike.
I'll sustain the objection and strike the response.
Based on your investigation, your experience and review of these messages, what did you believe line 2660 to be referencing?
It's referencing their death percentages,
And who are they?
Tylee and JJ.
And what is Lori's response to that, to the talk of death percentages of her children?
That it's sweet and she misses Chad Daybell desperately.
Was this the first time in these messages that you had seen reference to these death percentages that you can recall?
Yes, this is the first message, and there are several that follow in the next 3 weeks, and then later on, there are additional similar conversations regarding Tammy.
Were there additional messages on July 18th of 2019?
Yes, this conversation continues for the next couple of slides.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad to Lori, you are so adorable, beautiful, wonderful, heavenly, luscious, and angelic. Barf. So many divine attributes rolled into one dynamic, desirable package. I want you even more desperately now. Oh, desperately than you want me. Kiss, kiss. And then again from Chad, just grab me by the storm, oh God, and I will follow you to the ends of the universe. And Lori says, when might that be?
And Agent Hart, you indicated these are a continuation from the messages on the previous slide. Is that correct?
Yes.
What about these particular messages stood out to you?
Primarily lines 2622, 2608, and 2607.
Through the investigation, did you become familiar with what has been referred to as the James and Elena story?
Yes.
Did you become familiar with some of the texts that appeared to be a reference or continuation of that story as well?
Yes.
And do you know were you familiar with the term storm?
I am.
And did you know what that was in reference to?
Yes.
And what was that?
That's Chad Daybell's penis.
And Chad's texting to Lori to grab him by his storm and he'll
Judge, I'm
follow
going to
her
object
anywhere.
at this point. It's somewhat leading. And I think
Sustain on leading.
What else about that series of three messages caught your attention?
Well, throughout Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow's relationship, Lori is pushing Chad Daybell. And so I included these to show Lori Vallow questioning. Chad Daybell remarks that he'll follow her to the end of the universe. And her response is when? When might that be? Chad's response is in reference to a planned trip that he would take the following week, July 24th through July 26th of 2019, to be together with Lori Vallow. That's the reference to Wednesday evening to Friday. But we see Lori Vallow pushing Chad Daybell as it relates to their relationship.
So it would be Chad and Lori were going to be together physically or at the same time.
Yes, Chad Daybell traveled to be with Lori Vallow for a period of 2.5 days.
And again, during this time, was Tammy Daybell still alive?
Yes.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says to Chad, and then what? And Chad says, back to crying and saying goodbye, back to the box, question mark, question mark. And then Chad says, this trip to Utah had a lot of finality to it. I was told extreme changes are coming for me and to Utah. I welcome them both. That was in July 20.
And Agent Hart, I believe you indicated these are a continuation as well from the previous two slides.
They are.
What was it about these messages that caught your attention?
Primarily, there was two things.
And can we go through them one by one?
Sure.
What was the first thing?
The first is again, we see Lori Vallow manipulating Chad Daybell. In the prior slide, Chad Daybell had indicated that they would have this time together Wednesday through Friday. And Lori Vallow's response to that is, then what? And she then says, back to crying and saying goodbye, back to the box, as a reference to being trapped with their inability to be together.
And at this point in time, Charles Vallow has been killed,
This is 1 week following his death.
but Tammy's still alive.
Correct.
And what was the second thing?
The second thing is line 2603, which is Chad Daybell's response to her. And he references that extreme changes are coming for him, and he welcomes those changes.
And do you recall from previous testimony references Chad also made about feeling trapped?
Judge, I'm going to object. It's leading.
World.
Yes,
And do you recall approximately, or do you recall what those statements were, what that was in reference to?
yes, that conversation took place at the conclusion of this trip that they're talking about. So that would have been on July 26th of 2019, where Chad Daybell references the Harry Potter stories and feeling trapped, having to live under a stairwell, and he gets to escape occasionally to have adventures with his goddess lover.
And when you look at that line 2603, there's a reference to extreme changes. Did that catch your attention?
It did.
What did you, through your investigation and experience, what did you believe that to be in reference to?
Judge, calling for speculation. Objection.
Overruled.
Well, within 3 months of this date, Tylee, JJ, and Tammy are all dead.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says to Chad, "What's Blake's percentage?" And Chad says, "He drew 3 crosses on the wall in his bedroom. We just finished printing over here, printing over them." And Lori says, like he was marking it for the dark side to find him, to find him. And Chad says to Lori, "Blake is at 7. See, I took my sword of light and sliced his aura vertically in several places. You should be able to now rip and burn it." Chad says, "I also decreased his pain tolerance to 1% and greatly increased his pain. His desire to depart is at 80%.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged into
That
the
is
record?
sick, man.
Yes, this is July 20th of 2019.
And who are these messages between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
There's an individual reference named Blake. Did you learn who that was?
Blake is Melanie Boudreau's son.
Do you know his approximate age?
Wow.
3 to 4 years old at the time of this message.
Wow.
What about these messages caught your attention?
There were 2 things primarily that caught my attention in this series of communications.
What was the first one?
The first is, again, Lori Vallow is petitioning Chad Daybell to find out Blake's percentage. So repeatedly, we see Lori Vallow asking Chad Daybell to provide that information. Chad Daybell is the source of the death percentages.
What was the second thing?
The second thing is that this is a conversation about a 3 or 4-year-old child. And in line 2481, Chad Daybell writes that he decreased that child's pain tolerance to 1% and greatly increased his pain.
And do you recall in one of the previous slides in reference to Tylee Ryan, Chad talking about turning up or causing her pain?
Yes.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says to Chad, "Good morning. I miss you. Didn't sleep much. Need to check something. Weird stuff happened in the middle of the night. It's like they distracted us with Blake." That's the child. And then Lori says, "When you get home, check Tylee. She is being super sweet and helpful, and she cleaned her room. She got switched. Totally not her. See if she got switched." And then Chad says, "Yes, she was switched. Please let me know when you can talk and I will explain." Wow, man. What the hell? Exactly, Johnny. "I got my sabers beyond the veil and I sliced through their auras." Were you wearing your Sith mask?
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged into the record?
July 23rd of 2019.
And who were these messages between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
What about these messages caught your attention?
again, two things primarily caught my attention.
And what was the first thing?
The first is if we look at the time of these messages, there's an 11-hour gap between line 2276 and 2244. In line 2276, Lori Vallow petitions Chad Daybell to check JJ. In the subsequent line, 11 hours later, she's asking Chad Daybell to check Tylee to see if Tylee has been, quote, switched. And so these messages are 5 days after the initial first message that I ever located regarding death percentages. And so this is now the second time that I could find in the review of the iCloud where Lori Vallow is asking Chad Daybell specifically to check on JJ and then to check on Tylee. So that's the first thing that stood out to me.
And Charles Vallow had been killed not long before these messages.
12 days prior.
What was the second thing that stood out to you?
The second thing that stood out to me is in line 2241, which is Chad Daybell's response to her. And he replies that, yes, Tylee has been switched. And he says, let me know when you can talk and I will explain it. So Chad Daybell is the one who will explain to
Judge,
Lori
I'm going to
Vallow.
object at this point. Speculation.
Overruled.
And what was the last part of that answer?
Lori Vallow is making inquiries to Chad Daybell, and Chad Daybell tells her, I will explain it.
Prior to Charles being killed, are you aware if he was deemed to have been possessed?
He was.
And ultimately he was killed.
He was.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, how are things at home? And she says, she's fine. Need you to check JJ. She said he was calm and he watched movies all day, which he would never do. And then Lori says to Chad, missing you, kiss, kiss. That was July 26th, 2019.
And Agent Hart, can you read the date of these messages into the record?
Yes, July 26th of 2019.
So this is just 3 days after those last messages we looked at.
Correct.
What about these messages caught your attention?
That the pattern of Lori Vallow asking Chad Daybell to check is continuing. So on line 2119, Lori Vallow writes, need you to check JJ, and references his behavior, which was a departure from what was normal for him.
Tylee probably lied to protect JJ because
And moving to the next
Probably
slide, I'm going to
heard Lori
pause to allow
calling
the
him
jurors to
zombie.
read.
this one says from Chad, missing you too. It is still JJ. I'm told she is lying about him being calm and watching movies. Could be right. And then Lori says to Chad, Mel knew. She called me. She felt the real Brighton last night and knew she was different. She was told I didn't want to tell her. She is taking well and knowing it is part of the big plan. She is amazing. Kiss. Although I'm still pretty upset over it. I love you, heart, trying to hang in there, missing your kisses. I think this is after Lori finds out she didn't get the insurance payment. Yep. Tylee was scared.
And Agent Hart, can you read into the record the
right,
date these
Stacy.
messages were
Ah.
exchanged?
These messages were also, as with the previous slide, on July 26th, 2019.
What about these particular messages stood out to you?
Well, in response to the previous slides, request by Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell to check JJ, Chad Daybell replies that essentially JJ is still his true self, but he indicates whoever told Lori Vallow that JJ was calm and watching movies had been lying. So Chad Daybell answers Lori Vallow's inquiry regarding checking JJ.
And looking to that next message, are you aware who Brighton is?
Yes,
And who is that?
Brighton is another of Melanie Boudreau's children.
And the name Mel there, do you know who that was
Wow.
referencing?
That's Melanie Boudreau.
Was there anything about that next message that caught your attention?
This next message is somewhat vague, but we see a reference to a big plan, which is a word that we see repeatedly in conversations between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell referencing their plans.
Seems to me like Mel's part of a big plan and she's taking well to it.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, one question. Do you want me to cause pain yet to those 2 3s you're writing with? And Lori says, probably hold off on them until we arrive. They will be mistake to deal with, but I'll text you if they start acting up and we can zap them. Kiss, kiss. Oh my God. Miserable, not mistake. And then Chad says, sounds great. Yes. If they're going to act up, we'll at least give them a reason to scream. I love, cherish, treasure, and adore you. The wonderful memories just keep coming back. You are mesmerizing. Raphael is one lucky guy. I'm going to zap them. I'm going to give them pain.
And
or
Agent
hold
Hart,
off on
can
the
you read
pain.
the date of these messages into the record?
Yes, these 4 messages were exchanged on July 29th of 2019.
Who were the messages being exchanged between?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
You're fucked, Chad.
What about these particular messages caught your attention?
At this particular time in the investigation, Lori Vallow, Melanie Boudreau, and their children, as well as Alex Cox, had decided to take a trip to the California coast. And so these messages were sent to Lori Vallow as they were driving in the car, as Lori Vallow, Melanie Boudreau, Alex Cox, and the children were driving to California. And so Chad Daybell makes an offer to Lori Vallow to cause pain to the 2, quote, 3s that she was riding with.
Where in the Bible, exactly, right, Johnny? Where in the Bible does it say, let's zap them and
And
cause them
looking at
pain?
that, at the line 1872, did any of that catch your attention?
Of course. In line 1877, the 2 3s are referencing 2 of the children that are in the car with them. And in line 1872, Chad Daybell indicates that he would at least give them a reason to scream, indicating a supposed ability to cause physical pain to those children.
Monster.
After offering to cause physical pain to the children, what were the next things he said?
He told Lori that he loved, cherished, treasured, and adored her. The wonderful memories just keep coming back. She was mesmerizing, and that Raphael, which is the name for Chad Daybell, is one lucky guy.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
I got the inspiration, Chad says, I got the inspiration to go back to my original death percentages that helped us track Charles, Ned, etc. Tammy is very close. Her percentage has fallen steadily since Hiplos left. It is encouraging, heart kiss. And then Lori says, what is the percentage now? What about JJ's too? And then he says, Tammy is at 3, JJ is at 2. Both are being heavily shielded to stop intruders. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, is that where did Jesus say in the Bible? And I don't think, it's in the
And
Book of
Agent
Mormon.
Hart, would you read the
It's
date of these messages into the record?
These messages were exchanged on July 30th of 2019.
And who are these messages between?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
What about these particular messages caught your attention?
There were three very critical components of these messages.
Can we start with the first one?
Yes.
Hi,
And what was
Sharon.
that?
The first one is in line 1781. This is a text initiated by Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. And you can see that Chad said he had the inspiration to go back to my original death percentages. So this is the first time that we see the full phrase of death percentage, and it is attributable to Chad Daybell by the use of the word my. And then he indicates that these death percentages helped him track Charles, which is a reference to Charles Vallow. Ned is the name of the demonic entity that was alleged to be possessing Charles Vallow. And then he indicates that Tammy is very close. Her death percentage has fallen steadily, and concludes with, it is encouraging, exclamation point.
Do you also see the reference in there to Hiplos or Iplos?
Yes,
Do you know who that's in reference to?
that's the name of a demonic entity that was supposed to have been inside of Tammy Daybell.
And you said Tammy
Um,
on Hiplos.
Yes. So it says Tammy is very close. Her percentage, meaning Tammy's percentage, has fallen steadily since Hiplos left. So that entity is now out of her.
Do you recall if Hiplos was an entity that was indicated to be associated with Charles Vallow?
Judge, I'm going to object. That's leading.
Sustained.
Do you know who else Hiplos may have been associated with?
There was another reference to that using that same demonic entity name with Charles Vallow.
What was the second thing that stood out to you?
The second thing that stood out is this reference to Chad Daybell's death percentages that helped track Charles Vallow. Charles Vallow didn't have a heart attack or pass away in his sleep.
Judge, I'm going to object. It's narrative.
Overruled.
He was shot and killed. And so these death percentages by Chad Daybell are not simply a reference to natural deaths.
And what was the third thing?
Well, the third thing is in lines 1779 and 1778. Lori's response to Chad is to inquire, what is the percentage now? Meaning, what is Tammy Daybell's death percentage? And then she follows that up with yet another inquiry. This would be now the third inquiry about JJ's death percentage. Chad Daybell responds, Tammy is at 3, JJ is at 2.
And based on your review and your investigation, in relation to death percentages, what was the indication the lower the number got?
Hey, Chopper.
Well, it's not consistent. So you have references where the lower the number, the closer to death they are. And then you have references where the higher the number, the closer they are. So in the previous communication, you saw Chad Daybell indicate that JJ was at 99.99. And he instructed JJ to follow Amy into the light. In this occasion, we flipped and they're at the opposite end of the spectrum, saying that Tammy is at 3 and now JJ is at 2 versus the prior message. So there's a lack of consistency, but the higher the number in one case, the lower the number in another.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says 2 and 3%, not 0. And he says, I will explain when we talk. And Lori says, okay, kiss, fire, fire, still feeling hot for you, fire, fire. Jesus.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were sent into the record?
Yes, July 30th, 2019. These are a continuation from the previous slide.
And what about these messages stood out to you?
Well, first, Lori Vallow's response back to Chad Daybell after receiving his answer that I believe it was Tammy was at a 3 and JJ was at a 2. She replies 2 and 3%, not 0. So we see Lori Vallow pushing 0, meaning the time has come for those individuals to die.
Judge objection calls for speculation. I'm going to move to strike, Judge.
Well, the objection's not timely. I'll overrule it at this point, but Ms. Blake, I am concerned if the witness is making his own interpretations of these messages, not based on the investigation. So if you could direct the examination that way, that'll help with the objections.
And in coming to that conclusion, was that based on your experience and your review of the information?
Yes.
What else stood out about this particular message?
Line 1776, where Chad Daybell says, I will explain when we talk, indicating he is the source of what's happening.
Was that consistent with your review of these messages?
Yes, we see that exact phrase multiple times. I will explain.
Anything else about this particular series that stood out to you?
Well, lastly, again, we see how Lori Vallow is attempting to manipulate Chad Daybell. She concludes this conversation with, okay, still feeling hot for you.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, yes, we might need to release a little steam when we talk, fire, fire. Anyway, this is the chart that checks what percentage mortals are still in their body. It worked for my friend's wife who died, my neighbor, George Bush, Stan Lee, etc. I kind of forgot about it because we've been dealing with zombies and demonic entities. But this afternoon, Tammy said she felt lightheaded, as if her body and spirit weren't connected. And then Chad says, I will update the list and figure out Brandon, Adam, and others.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these were being sent into the record?
These two text messages were also on July 30th of 2019.
And who were these messages between?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
What about these particular messages caught your attention?
Two things.
What was the first one?
The first is a continuation to further explain Chad Daybell's death percentages. In the second sentence, he references this chart that checks what percentage mortals are still in their body, and then indicates that it worked for his friend's wife who died. And so we see just a further explanation of death percentages, and that this is talking about physical, real death, not spiritual death or some other kind of death.
Was that chart that was referenced, was a copy of it ever located?
No, we could never find the actual chart. I can't account for where it might be.
And what was the second thing that stood out to you?
Well, there are two more. The first is that he references Tammy Daybell, his wife, that she said she felt lightheaded as if her body and spirit weren't connected.
And then what was the third thing?
The third thing is in line 1773, where Chad Daybell indicates he would update the list and figure out Brandon, Adam, and others. The reference to Brandon is Brandon Boudreau, and on October 2nd of 2019.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. This is definitely becoming a narrative.
Sustained.
Who was Brandon referencing?
Brandon Boudreau.
Do you know of something that happened in relation to Brandon Boudreau?
Yes,
What was that?
on October 2nd, 2019, an attempt was made on his life.
Are you aware of an attempt that was made on Tammy Daybell's life?
Judge, I'm going to object. Calls for speculation.
Overruled.
I am.
And when was that?
October 9th, 2019.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Sorry, guys, I can't read that at all. It's way too blurry at this distance.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these images were sent?
These were both sent on August 7th of 2019.
Were you able to, looking at that first image there, who is that?
That is Chad Daybell.
Can you tell from the photo what type of building he may be in?
Yes, it's the lobby of an old LDS church.
And who sent that photo?
So the photo of Chad Daybell was sent by Alex Cox to Lori Vallow with the caption, "Look at the bubbies."
Do you know what Bubbies was a reference to?
That was a word.
Judge, objections. Calling for speculation. No foundation.
I'll sustain that without additional foundation.
Through your investigation and review of messages, were you able to determine what Bubbies was in reference to?
Yes,
And what was that?
it's just simply a pet name that Lori had for Chad Daybell and Alex Cox or other men in her life.
And could you see the time that that message was sent?
10:48 a.m.
And turning to the next image, who are we seeing in that photo?
That's a photograph of Alex Cox.
Does that appear to be in the same location?
Yes,
And what time was that message sent?
1 minute prior on 10:47 a.m.
Who sent that message?
Chad Daybell,
And who did he send it to?
Lori Vallow.
What was the caption that Chad included?
Two exalted beings.
Jesus.
Was Tammy
Jesus.
Daybell still alive on August 7th of 2019?
Yes,
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says, I love you, heart. Taking Braxy home now. I'll check on her. And then Lori says, she is asleep. She put a bunch of holes in the walls and doors. Definitely had demons helping her, probably 1,000. And Lori says again, Mill wants us to come up there tomorrow, but I said next Thursday to Sunday. What do you think? And then Lori says, we're both so tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them. Kiss emoji. Jesus Christ. Blasphemy. Absolute blasphemy.
Would you please indicate the date these messages were sent into the record?
these messages were exchanged on August 7th of 2019.
Who were the messages exchanged between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
And these messages were sent on the same day as those two images?
Correct.
What about these messages stood out to you?
The thing that stood out the most in this text series is in line 1391 in the text from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell, where she indicates, "We are both so tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them!" Exclamation point.
And Lori was sending that request to Chad?
Correct.
I think she's Stacy. I think she's talking about the dog. I think. I'm not sure.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says, please check JJ. He just woke up saying crazy stuff and I won't go back to sleep. He's talking to Blake. It's weird. Kiss emoji. And then Chad says, JJ is still JJ. I'm told his spirit recognizes Blake is evil and is unsettled by him. Oh, sorry. Braxy is one of Melanie's kids. Sorry, guys. And then Chad says, hi, my love. How is JJ now? And then Lori says, he is better. He was just talking nonsense for like 2 hours last night. I'm sure they were bugging him. Is he at 0 yet? I miss you. Fire emoji.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were sent into the record?
These messages were exchanged on August 10th of 2019.
And is it fair to say that some of the next slides are going to correspond with the same date?
Yes, it's this slide and the next 5 slides are all a continuous exchange of messages between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
What about this first slide with these messages caught your attention in relation to the investigation?
What first caught my attention is we see now, I believe, the 4th time that Lori Vallow is asking Chad Daybell to check on JJ. And Chad Daybell responds once again that JJ is still JJ.
And at this point, Charles has been dead for almost a month.
Correct.
Through the investigation and your review, of the information in this case, did Lori have help with JJ prior to Charles passing?
Absolutely.
And who was helping her with him?
Charles Vallow spent a considerable amount of time and effort in caring for
Judge, I'm going to
JJ.
object at this point. Move to strike. There hasn't been sufficient foundation.
Sustained.
Through the review of iCloud, did you review videos?
Yes,
Did you review other content?
yes,
In that content, were there references to Charles taking care of JJ?
many.
And at the time these percentages are being pursued, Charles is no longer able to assist with JJ.
Correct.
And also, Lori stopped giving him his medicine. Of course, he's going to act up. And his dog.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, yes, he's at 0. He probably was partly through the veil talking to people, both light and dark. And Lori says, maybe he was talking to the real Blake.
And Agent Hart, you'd indicated this is a continuation of the previous slide.
Yes.
And what about these particular messages caught your attention?
Well, primarily line 1170. In the last line of the previous slide, Lori Vallow asks Chad Daybell if JJ is at 0 yet. And we see Chad Daybell's response to that question, yes, he's at 0. He was probably partly through the veil, talking to people, both light and dark.
And on the previous slide, in this one, we again see a reference to Blake. Again, who was Blake?
Blake is Melanie Boudreau's child.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says, do you think there's this perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children and we just have to wait for it to be carried out? And Lori says, I feel lost, like I should be doing something to help. Sad emoji. And Chad says, there is a plan being orchestrated for the children. I was shown last night how it fit together, but it has been taken from my mind, of course.
And
Wow.
Agent Hart, is this again a continuation of the previous two slides?
It is.
Who are these messages being exchanged between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
What about these particular messages stood out to you in relation to the investigation?
This particular conversation is some of the most critical evidence that I located within the iCloud. It represents the clearest and most specific reference.
Judge, I'm going to object again. This is speculation.
Overruled.
Yeah,
It
overruled.
represents the clearest and most specific reference
Exactly,
to a
Grandma.
plan regarding Tylee and JJ. That plan is spearheaded by Chad Daybell.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. That's a narrative
Also,
and it's argumentative,
it's sustained.
and I'm going to move to strike.
That last part of the comment is stricken.
When you indicate that there's the reference to the plan, who is asking if there's a plan?
Let's go, Camille.
Lori Vallow is asking Chad Daybell if there is a, quote, perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children.
What is Chad's response?
Chad's response is that there is a plan
Right.
being orchestrated for the children.
Right. Yep, I agree.
Where
Truth
were
matters.
Tylee and JJ's remains ultimately located?
On Chad Daybell's property.
He's mad. You can tell that agent. Hang your head in shame, Chad Daybell.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says, "What should I be doing?" Chad says, "You're doing everything right, my love. The Lord told me she is right on track. He said to just keep resolving the telestial issues so you are unencumbered and fully free." And then Chad says, "That actually feels good that JJ was talking to the real Blake, getting close. When I was sitting across from him eating bacon, I sensed he was barely attached to his body." Imagine people thinking this about you while they're sitting across from you eating bacon for breakfast and you're a child.
And Agent Hart, is this also a continuation from some of the previous slides?
Yes, it is.
Who are these messages being sent between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
What about these particular messages stood out to you in relation to the investigation?
Well, first off is line 1159. In the previous slide, there was a question about a plan and a verification of a plan. Then Lori Vallow asks Chad Daybell, "What should I be doing?" And in the subsequent line, 1158, Chad Daybell provides an answer to her, which concludes with being unencumbered and fully free.
That's right. Truth matters. It's a plan.
There's also a reference in that to telestial issues. Do you know through the investigation what telestial would be referencing?
I do.
What is that?
Issues pertaining to this earthly life.
The earth. The things on the
And in
earthly
some of the
plane.
previous messages, Lori was inquiring about the death percentages of Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow.
That's correct.
What else stood out in relation to these messages?
Line 1155 is very critical. Chad Daybell texts Lori Vallow and indicates that JJ is, quote, "getting close. When I was sitting across from him eating bacon, I sensed he was barely attached to his body."
Do you know when the last time JJ Vallow was seen?
I do.
When was that?
September 22nd, 2019.
That's right, Johnny.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says, "You're so incredible. In many ways, your mission has barely begun." And she says, "As long as it ends with you, it's all good," fire emoji. And he says, "Yes, cheek to cheek, loin to loin. It isn't very far away, my love," kiss emoji, kiss emoji. And she says, "Wish I could see you and be cheek to cheek," kiss emoji. Barf.
And Agent Hart, again, is this a continuation of some of those previous slides?
Yes, it is. And I believe there's one more that is part of this conversation.
I'm going to move to that slide and pause to allow the jurors to read that one as well.
Chad says, "I seriously cannot stop crying. I was allowed to feel my own emotions. I will experience as you sing to them. And the love, admiration, and reverence I have for you are so indescribable. Everything we do together is going to be spectacular." And she says, "I can't wait. Literally, I can't wait. I have no patience. I want you now." And Chad says, "I'm certainly your biggest fan. I love you, Lily. Hold on, my sweet angel. We're so close to the finish line." And she says, "I'm trying." And he says, "We'll make it. Heart, heart." dove something rabbit. I don't know. Sick.
And going back to that previous slide, what about this one caught your attention?
Well, this is just the continuation of the conversation. I think the more important content is on the following slide.
And what about these particular messages stood out to you?
Primarily lines 1117 and 1113. In 1117, Lori Vallow, as we've seen previously, says to Chad Daybell, I can't wait, literally can't wait. I have no patience. I want you now, with 2 fire emojis. And then we see Chad Daybell's response to that, which point.
Based on your investigation, your review of the content of the iCloud, what did you determine the finish line to be?
The finish line was for Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow to live this fantasy life together that they had constructed and referenced in this plan that they're talking about.
Did that include being unencumbered?
Judge, I'm going to object. Calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Unencumbered from her husband and her children and from his wife. Yes.
Your Honor, looking at the time, I don't know if you'd like to do the mid-morning break.
I think this would be a good time for that. Thank you, Ms. Blake. We will take our mid-morning recess. We'll come back on just 10:30 or perhaps shortly before 10:30. Thank you.
All rise, please.
All right, they're taking their break. What did you all think of that? Personally, to me, that was showing us the very slow walk to the very slow walk of death that Chad and Lori were marching the kids down. Right? Absolutely twisted. Completely twisted. And what struck me was hearing how they would talk about delivering pain to children and then immediately after that say heart emoji, whatever, Okay, now I'm going to see if they've come back now. So they should be back in a few minutes, but I'm going to show you a few things. I'm going to show you a few things that I was looking for these things yesterday, but I found them. And I'll be monitoring to see when they come back, and we'll return right back to the trial. But we were talking about Chad's kids and the fact that they are going to be testifying on his behalf. So as far as we know, which is what as far as we know, which is what we've been told by Pryor, is that 4 of Chad's children are going to be testifying on his behalf. And we know that the person who's been most vocally on Chad's side has been Emma Daybell. And I was looking for a meme yesterday that I knew had been posted by either Emma or her husband. Her husband's name is Joseph Murray. I found that meme, but really quickly too, it wasn't a meme. It was an ad. It was an incredibly distasteful ad. I'm going to show that to you in a moment. But first, to answer Johnny's question, I don't get why they wanted to cause pain to the children. I think it was to punish them. So when he was talking about giving pain to the children, he was talking about specifically Melanie Pulowski's kids. She has, if I recall correctly, 5 children, and they were really angry at Brandon Boudreaux for not cooperating with the custody and the divorce and things like that. There was a big battle going on, and they considered Brandon to be, a zombie. And so, and they considered him to be poisoning Melanie's kids against her. So, so they were, I think they were trying to punish the kids. It's not right, Johnny. None of this is godly. None of this is godly. In fact, it's absolutely satanic. So that's why, the behavior of Chad's kids is also blowing me away. How on earth did Chad's kids sign up for this? He had 2 parents. Their kids had 2 parents. They had both Chad and Tammy. And from what I'm seeing, because they have so fallen in line with Chad's side of the story, or so it appears, they have really signed up for this idea that the man is in charge. He has the priestly power, and maybe they've fallen in line with the idea that he really is a prophet. But this, what I'm going to show you, is what Emma Daybell's husband posted on Facebook just after the kids were discovered and recovered from Chad's backyard. Free compost. You must haul. I'm moving and need it gone by tomorrow. And this is actually from the burial site. Now, he apparently took this down immediately. He posted it and took it down. Look at this. This is a picture of where the kids were recovered. At least one of the kids. This is absolutely fucking evil. He put it up. People screenshotted it, and then he took it down. And don't forget, when Chad was being arrested, in the body cam footage, he has a full-on conversation. Joseph Murray is Emma Murray's husband. So Emma Daybell Murray is now her name. Joseph Murray is her husband. Joseph Murray is one of the people who called 911 when Tammy thought that she had a paintball gun pointed at her. So she called 911, and this guy, Joseph Murray, called 911 on October 9th when Alex Cox pointed a gun at her. And then fast forward, to October 19th, she dies, and they rush to get her buried without an autopsy, right? 2 days later in Springville, Utah. And then fast forward you know, so that was in October. Fast forward to January, and they are looking at the Daybell property, looking for the kids, and Emma Daybell drives by the news reporter and sticks her tongue out. This person, this Joseph Murray's wife, Chad and Tammy's daughter. Then they recover the remains of Tylee and JJ in the backyard of Chad Daybell. And very soon after that, Joseph Murray, Emma's husband, posts this. People on Facebook were quick to capture it, and they posted it in the, what is it called? I'm in it right now. The Vallow Daybell case discussion private group. I've been in that group for a long time, but I rarely go into Facebook. But I went into Facebook just for you all to find this, because I remembered seeing it. Hey, Sparkles, the state has not rested. But they are on their last witness. They're just in the middle of a break at the moment. They should be coming back any moment. So not only did Emma Daybell, oh, they're back. And they are back. But I wanted to show you that is the mentality of
All right, Mr. Bailiff, we'd like the jurors brought in, please.
at least one of Chad's kids. I was also just reading an article, and I remembered, it refreshed my memory, an article about how, you know, there was this big memorial, all kinds of flowers and balloons and signs for JJ and Tylee after the kids were recovered at the Daybell house. And people from the town were coming by to visit and pay respects. And then one day, and Joseph Murray was coming around and telling people to leave and stop visiting the property and saying this is private property. And then all of a sudden one day people woke up and noticed that the entire memorial had been wiped out. Everything had been taken away.
Here's our president counter for you, Arn.
These
Thank you.
people
Please
are
be seated.
fucking cold-hearted assholes. Cold-hearted.
All right. We're back on the record on CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Continuing with direct examination. Agent Hart, if you'd like to continue, Ms. Blake, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. And may I go back to publishing?
Yes, you may.
And Agent Hart, we'd left off with this slide. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And we'd left off talking about the finish line.
correct.
Was this the last slide that was part of this particular series of texts?
Yes, it was.
Hi, Solo.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Alex says to Lori, Wi-Fi is in. What you doing? And Lori says to Alex, working on Z's, probably zombie. What did you decide on username and password? Alex says, network name is anti-layman.
And Agent
Password
Hart,
is
can you
too many
indicate
kids.
the date that these messages were being exchanged?
Yes, this text exchange is from September 3rd of 2019
Who are the messages being exchanged between?
between Alex Cox and his sister, Lori Vallow.
Do you know where Lori Vallow was living at this time?
Yes, both Alex Cox and Lori Vallow moved to Rexburg, Idaho from Arizona on September 1st of 2019.
Was there anything else about these messages that stood out to you?
Line 264 from Alex Cox to Lori Vallow, where he indicates the network password is too many kids. And her response is funny, exclamation point, exclamation point.
When was the last known sighting of Tylee Ryan?
Last known sighting of Tylee Ryan was September 8th of 2019.
And when was the last known sighting of JJ Vallow?
September 22nd of 2019.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Alex says, and I can change it to whatever you want. If you want to change it, I'm proud of you. No more Z's. And she says, we're trying to get to the bottom of what we need to do to eliminate them completely. Heart. I'm sure you will be told also, heart. And he says, excellent. I mean, as if this is just a regular conversation with hearts at the end. Yeah, isn't that funny, Rachel Lee? Oh, is it so funny? Too many kids. Too many kids. Ah, ha, 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 ha.
And Agent Hart, is this a continuation from the previous slide?
Yes, it is.
Who are these messages between?
Again, between Alex Cox and Lori Vallow.
What about these particular messages caught your attention in relation to the investigation?
In relation to the investigation, these few messages provide a little bit of insight as to Alex Cox's role within this small circle of people, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
And in that line, do you know what the Z's was referring to based on your investigation?
I do.
What would Z's be in reference to?
Z's is an abbreviation for zombies.
And then when we look to that line 261 in particular, was there something about that that stood out to you?
Yes, Lori Vallow indicates that they're trying to get to the bottom of what we need to do to eliminate them completely. And then she indicates to Alex Cox that he would be told also. And so to me, that sheds light on
Judge, I'm going to object. It's becoming a narrative and it's calling for speculation.
Overruled.
it sheds light on Alex's knowledge, how much knowledge he has, and that he too would be told what to do or what his role would be.
In your review of these messages, was Alex included in the text regarding death percentages?
He was not.
And this message indicates Alex would be told.
Correct.
And what was Alex's response?
Excellent.
And again, those messages were exchanged on September 3rd of 2019.
Yes.
What are we seeing in this slide?
This slide contains a very short, it's just a few seconds, video that I located within the iCloud. As part of our investigation, we went to great pains to try to determine when Tylee was killed and when was the last known sighting that we could verify. And that last known sighting is on September 8th, 2019. This is a video of a trip that was taken with Lori Vallow, Alex Cox, JJ, and Tylee to Yellowstone National Park. It's the last known living proof for Tylee.
And this is 5 days after the messages about eliminating zombies completely,
Yes,
and 5 days after the messages about Alex being told what to do.
yes.
And who else was in that video?
Tylee is hugging her younger brother, JJ, and Alex Cox is standing off to the side.
Can you tell us what we're seeing in this slide?
Yes, in a similar vein, we searched for what would be the last known sighting or living proof of JJ. And this is what I located on the iCloud. It's from September 22nd of 2019 at 10:46 a.m. in the morning. Subsequent to this video, there are no other photos or videos existing in the iCloud of JJ.
And again, where were JJ and Tylee's remains found?
Chad Daybell's property.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Hi, Lolo. Are we still good for me coming today? This is from Sydney Woodbury. I don't know who that is. Hi, Sydney. I hope the wedding was good. So JJ's grandparents came this weekend and they took him for a few weeks to give me a break. So he won't be back until probably the end of October. I wish I had other work for you to do. You are a darling girl. I understand if you need to get another job. Of course, I'm not sure when he will be. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Of course, I'm not sure when he will be back. I'm going to do some traveling while he's gone, probably see my friends in Hawaii, but I'll let you know for sure when we are both back in Rexburg. You are great. So I think that's the babysitter.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
These are from September 24th of 2019.
Hi, Teacup.
Who are these messages between?
These are messages between Sydney Woodbury and Lori Vallow.
And in relation to this date, was it significant?
Yes,
And why was that?
the date is 2 days after our last known living proof for JJ.
What else about these messages stood out to you in relation to your investigation?
These are the first lies we can find documented by Lori Vallow regarding JJ and his whereabouts.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause, allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, good night, Angel Lily. So excited to go on our date. Fire emoji. Lori says to Alex, we're supposed to go on a real date tonight, but we're discussing it. Perhaps an evening at home would be better so we are not out and about. I'll let you know, but you could come Come and sing with us after your shower, heart. Chad says to Lori, hello, sweet angel. Big news about Tammy. Please let me know if you are awake and can talk. I love you. Heart kiss emoji. Big news about Tammy. And this is on October 5th. And that was 3 days after they tried to kill her.
And Agent Hart, there's 3 messages here that all contain a different date. Is that correct?
It is.
At the time these messages were exchanged, was Charles Vallow alive?
No,
Was Tylee Ryan believed to be alive?
no,
JJ Vallow believed to be alive?
nope,
Was Tammy Daybell alive?
yes.
Looking at the first message, can you indicate the date that was sent?
First message was sent on October 3rd of 2019.
Who was it being sent from and who was it going to?
This was a message from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow.
Was there something about that message that stood out to you?
Yes, Chad Daybell indicated that he was so excited to go on a date with Lori Vallow.
And the next one, can you indicate the date?
It's the following day, October 4th, 2019.
Who is that message from?
That's a message from Lori Vallow to her brother, Alex Cox.
And what about that, if anything, caught your attention?
Well, at this point, both Alex Cox and Lori Vallow had moved to Rexburg, Idaho, were living in Rexburg, Idaho. And the investigation indicates that Tylee and JJ were both deceased at this point. Lori Vallow says to Alex Cox, we are supposed to go on a quote, real date tonight, but are discussing it. And then she indicates perhaps an evening at home would be better, so we are not out and about.
And again, at this time, Tammy Daybell is still alive.
She is.
Where was Lori Vallow living at this time?
She was living in Rexburg, Idaho, which is a very short distance from Sugar City, where the Daybell residence was located.
And then looking at that last message, can you indicate the date?
October 5th, 2019.
Who was that message being sent from and who was it going to?
So this is a message from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. And then there will be 2 more slides that are a continuation of Chad Daybell reaching out to Lori Vallow approximately 12 hours after the prior text indicating that an evening home may be better rather than a real date.
And in that last message, can you read that last message into the record?
Hello, sweet angel. Big news about Tammy. Please let me know if you are awake and can talk. I love you, exclamation point, and then heart and lip emojis.
There's an indication in there from Chad to Lori that there's big news about Tammy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, the short version is that she has been switched. Tammy is in limbo, and a level 3 demonic entity named Viola is in her body. It happened at about 10 p.m. and was done by Tammy's sister, Sam, who I always knew was 3D, but it turns out she is multiple creation. And then Chad says, Viola has been attached for about a year to my niece, Danica, who is Sam's 12-year-old daughter. I've connected with Tammy in limbo, and she is very frustrated and upset. She wants Viola removed as soon as possible. Viola seems to be similar to Penelope. The personality differences from Tammy should be evident quickly. Please seek a confirmation on this, but I have now checked 3 times since I got home and get more affirmative answers each time.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
Yes, the date is October 5th, 2019. And the times are within minutes of one another, as well as within minutes of the prior text where Chad Daybell indicated he had big news about Tammy.
And looking at these messages, were there things that caught your attention?
Yes, there's 2 text messages on this slide and then 2 more text messages. All 4 of these text messages are from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. I found no response from Lori Vallow to these messages. But in these messages, Chad Daybell is providing an explanation, a narrative indicating that Tammy has been switched and that there is a demonic entity that is now in Tammy Daybell's body that she wants removed. And that word removed, I think, is critical.
And do you see in here a reference to the name of the demonic entity?
Yes, the name that Chad Daybell assigns to this demonic entity is Viola.
Judge, I'm going to object, move to strike. There's no testimony regarding who assigned what.
Overruled.
We talked about the word removal based on your review of the iCloud account, your review of other things involved in this investigation. What was significant about removal?
Removal indicates the physical death of the person who has the demonic entity.
I think this is a slam dunk for the jury. I truly do.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Says to Lori, Sam is much like Brandon. She has been my biggest enemy over the years. She refuses to read my books and threw the biggest fit when we moved to Idaho. She has only visited us when the kids got married and always fled Idaho within hours, like she was being burned. She's definitely comparable to Brandon in Summer. And then Chad says, not fully sure of the timing for removal, but once her actions verify the differences, I don't want to wait. And that's on the 5th of October. Yeah, Pryor should just forfeit. Pryor should just hold up his hands and say, I give up, Judge. But he's too far into it now.
And Agent Hart, I believe you indicated this is a continuation from the previous slide.
It is. These are all, I believe the very first text message was 4:36 a.m. And so the final and 5th text message in this string, all from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow, is at 4:54 a.m.
And again, what day?
on October 5th of 2019.
Yep, drunk on.
What about these particular messages caught your attention in relation to the investigation?
In relation to the investigation, line 769 is a crucial piece of evidence from the iCloud that is a very specific reference to the alleged crimes involving Tammy Daybell.
Judge, object. Mischaracterization, speculation, argumentative.
I'm going to sustain that as argumentative.
We had just talked about the meaning of the word removal in the investigation. Do you see reference to removal in this line?
I do. Chad Daybell writes, not fully sure of the timing for removal, but once her actions verify the differences, I don't want to wait.
What happened on October 9th of 2019?
October 9th,
Answer, Judge.
What was that?
Objection. I asked and answered.
Overruled.
on October 9th, 2019 was the first attempt on Tammy Daybell's life.
And they're also talking about Brandon, and they had attempted his life on the 2nd.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
From an unknown individual to Lori, it says, I'm not sure if you heard, but Chad's wife died last night. Sad emojis. And Lori says, oh my gosh, I did not hear that. I'm in Hawaii and it's 6 a.m. Sad emojis. Lori says, do you know what happened? And they say, yes, she awoke in the night
And
coughing.
Agent
threw
Hart,
up
can you
and
indicate
passed
the
away.
date these messages were being exchanged?
These are messages exchanged on October 19th, 2019.
What was significant about October 19th of 2019 in your investigation?
That is the date of Tammy Daybell's death.
Who were these text messages being exchanged between?
This is between Lori Vallow and an individual who wasn't identified by name within the iCloud. So I can't tell you who this is that's telling her this information.
What was significant about these messages? Or let me withdraw that. What caught your attention in relation to these messages?
Simply that someone knew that Tammy Daybell had died and then provided that information to Lori Vallow, who was in Hawaii at the time.
Do you know where Chad Daybell was at the time?
In his residence in Sugar City, Idaho.
Do you know where Alex Cox was?
Alex Cox was in Rexburg, Idaho.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says to Chad, not fun without you. Can you call me? And then she says, how are you doing? Is the question. And he says, I'm hanging in there. My parents are staying here and we are still getting visitors, but I will call you soon. And that's all on the 19th when Tammy died.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
Again, on October 19th, 2019.
And who were these messages being exchanged between?
These are between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
What in relation to these messages stood out to you in relation to the investigation?
Primarily the timing of the messages in conjunction with Tammy Daybell's death. And then this is the first in a series of messages over the next 24 hours or so between Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow subsequent to Tammy Daybell's death.
And again, Tammy Daybell was pronounced dead on October 19th of 2019.
Yes, the call, the 911 call was approximately 6 a.m. on October 19th, 2019.
So the same day these messages are exchanged.
Correct.
And move to the next slide and pause to allow the jurors to read.
Chad says to Lori, percentage in body holes or 24 Eucola, 11 Grissom, 14. What the hell? And then Chad says, great job on lowering them. I love talking with you. It is baby night so come get me later. What the hell? Missing you so much. I can feel you in bed with me though. Can't wait to truly hold you tightly every day and
And
night.
Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
Jesus.
These messages are on October 20th, 2019.
And who were these messages between?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
And this is the day after Tammy's been pronounced dead?
Well, the first two messages, as you can see, are just past midnight. So they're approximately 18 hours after Tammy Daybell's death. And then the last two messages are approximately 25 and a half hours after that 911 call regarding Tammy Daybell's death.
What else about these messages stood out to you in relation to the investigation?
Well, line 527 on that date is a text from Chad to Lori Vallow, where he indicates, "I love talking with you. It's baby night, so come get me later."
Do you know where Lori Vallow would have been at that time?
She's in Hawaii.
What do you think baby night is, y'all?
In the messages that you reviewed shortly after Tammy's death, any expression of grief by Chad Daybell regarding his wife's death?
None,
Any expression of grief by Lori Vallow?
none.
And if you recall, when you testified previously, you'd reviewed messages around the time of Charles' death, is that correct?
Yes,
Any expression of grief by Lori in those?
none,
Any expression of grief by Chad in those?
no.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says to Chad, "Need you to hold me tight. That would be great. What about the idea of you coming here Thursday or Friday, or do you want me to come home?" And Chad says, "Their apartment is haunted and we can't clear the place. So they are looking to move anyway. And I have the perfect place for them. I need to be here to get sorting the financial stuff. And I truly need your help. So please come home Thursday so we can spend the night together. Then as soon as I have things under control, we can return. I seriously want you to look for a condo for us while you are there that we could return to at the first of the month." I think baby night may be taking care of grandchildren. And I think he's talking about his getting things sorted with his children. Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that. Thank you, Stacy. I love you all. I love hanging out with you all talking about trials.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
October 20th of 2019 in the early morning hours.
And who are they being exchanged between?
Again, it's a continuation between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Were there things about these particular messages that stood out to you in relation to the investigation?
We're now getting into the logistics of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow being together subsequent to Tammy Daybell's death. Lori Vallow actually invites Chad to jump on a plane and come to Kauai. And Chad Daybell responds that she should come back to the mainland so that they can spend the night together on Thursday, and then indicates wanting to look for a condo so that they could return to Kauai at the first of the month, meaning November.
And do you recall from your previous testimony reviewing some messages regarding a plan to be in Kauai?
I do.
And who was that plan between?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
Do you know if Chad and Lori were ultimately married?
They were
Where did they get married?
on the island of Kauai.
Do you know where Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow moved to?
The island of Kauai.
And this conversation took place about 25 hours after Tammy Daybell had been pronounced dead.
About 26 hours after the 911 call by Chad Daybell to indicate to authorities that his wife was dead.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
I want to get going full steam on the Lily workout plan. This is Chad talking. Tighten the abs, get the full body tan, grow my hair out. This could be really good for both of us. My God. Lori says, "I love that plan, Kiss. It's not soon enough, though. This is torture. Maybe I need to clear my mind so I can't remember how much I love you." Heart emoji. Chad says, "I will try, but it feels like Raphael and Lily are together about 100%. Not sure it will ever be lower again. Fucking gross. 11-year-olds. It is the cringiest, Rachel.
And Agent Hart, would you indicate the date that these messages were exchanged?
Yes, Johnny. They
October 20th of 2019.
And are these a continuation from some of the previous slides we've reviewed?
Yes, they are.
And who were these messages between?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
In relation to your investigation, what stood out to you with these messages?
Again, it's a continuation of the fulfillment of their plans to be together. The first line, 5118, Chad Daybell indicates a workout plan for Lily, who is Lori Vallow, that he wants to tighten his abs, get a full body tan, grow his hair out, and that it could be really good for both him and Lori Vallow.
And in that last one, 516, do you know who Raphael and Lily is referring to?
Those are, again, alternate names for Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
And is there an indication there about how much they will be together?
100%.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says, "That's true. I do feel you, Hart. I feel lovesick. I can't sleep. I don't want to eat. I just want you. It's so consuming." Sad emoji, sad emoji. Chad says, "I know exactly how you feel. I'm feeling sad, but it isn't for the reason everyone thinks." And this is on the 20th, the day after Tammy died. And they're all running around figuring out her funeral and her memorial and her burial. And all his family's grieving.
Agent Hart, can you please indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
Yes, this is the conclusion of this text string, and the date is October 20th, 2019.
And who are the messages between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Was there anything that stood out to you in relation to the investigation in these messages?
Yes. In line 515, you have Lori Vallow indicating how consuming her love is for Chad Daybell. And then of note, line 514, Chad Daybell responds, "I know exactly how you feel. I'm feeling sad, but it isn't for the reason everyone thinks!" Exclamation point.
Through the investigation, did you learn what the connection between Alex Cox and Chad Daybell was?
Yes.
What was that?
Alex Cox was an adherent of Chad
Judge,
Daybell.
objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Did Chad beat Alex through Lori?
Yes.
Based on your investigation, review of messages, and other things, would Alex do as Chad asked?
Judge, objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
Yes.
Did Tammy Daybell know Alex Cox based on what you learned in the investigation?
No, she did not.
Was the only connection between Tammy and Alex Chad?
Correct.
Moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read.
Lori says, "I had a dream about Al. Make sure he is still him and protect him." And Lori then says, "He would be the one they used to get us both. All this time is not good for him." And Chad says, I will try to reach out to him later today. And then he says, I just cleared all of Al's weapons, curses, and cords and filled him with malachite healing balm. I also put angels around him. Oh, Chad, you're so powerful. And you see how they're saying they know that Alex is doing all these things, so he needs to be protected.
And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date these messages were exchanged?
Yes, October 23rd of 2019.
And who were the messages being exchanged between?
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
And do you recall in a previous slide talking about a message where Alex was going to be told information also?
Yes.
What about these messages stood out to you in relation to the investigation?
In relation to the investigation, primarily lines 482 and 481 stood out to me. In line 482, Lori Vallow indicates she's had a bad dream about Al. And primarily line 481, Lori indicates that Alex Cox would be the one they use to get us both. All this alone time is not good for him. So something that Alex Cox knows is a risk to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Based on your investigation, review of the iCloud, and other information, who was the they being referred to?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
I believe that is a direct reference to law enforcement.
What is Chad's response in line 479?
Chad Daybell indicates I will try to reach out to him later today.
So Chad was going to be the one to reach out to Al.
Correct.
And Lori was requesting Chad's help with talking to Al.
Correct.
Conspiracy.
And again, through your review of the messages, who was seeking information?
Primarily Lori Vallow,
And who was providing the answers?
primarily Chad Daybell.
I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake.
Good job, Miss Blake, aka Camille. She's the next Camille Vasquez. I hope they put her on the Brian Kohberger case.
All right, Mr. Pryor,
Possible,
cross-examination.
Rachel. It's possible. All right. What does Pryor?
Thank you, Judge.
What could Pryor possibly do? What could he possibly say? What, that none of the messages said, let's go kill the kids? Okay. You're not going to
Agent Hart, there was a discussion about when you're investigating missing children, who the potential folks that you would look to if you were starting your investigation. Do you recall that discussion?
Yes.
And wouldn't it be fair to say that an obvious person to look for or look at when you're investigating missing children would be a new husband?
In addition to others, yes. We would look at the parent or the husband. I guess my point was you can't put blinders on. You can't exclusively hone in on one person at the onset of an investigation.
Right, and it would be inappropriate to do that. I mean, when you're looking in conducting an investigation, wouldn't it be fair to say that any and all evidence that you obtain you should look at all leads of evidence and not target your investigation in one channel. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's what we did.
And that's what as far as the FBI, that's what you did, right?
I participated in dozens of meetings with the Rexburg Police Department and the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. It's my belief that's what all of us did.
Okay. So again, just to reiterate, it's your contention that you didn't fail to investigate or look into evidence that might lead you in a different direction. Would that be fair?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, as part of your FBI training, you talked about that you were involved in the task of looking for identifying missing children, correct?
Yes.
And as part of that FBI training, is it your experience or the FBI's experience that they ever utilized the use of a medium to try to locate or talk to children who have passed on?
It's extremely common for people who claim to have those abilities to come forward, but no, the FBI does not employ mediums in its investigations.
And I didn't say employ, I said utilize, but do you know the name Allison Dubois?
I believe I'm familiar with that name, yes.
And Ms. Dubois is a medium who claims to have the ability to talk to children and to help.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
Sustained.
What is your knowledge of Allison Dubois?
It's my belief that she holds herself out to be a spiritual medium.
And that spiritual medium is being able to talk to children who have passed on?
I couldn't say specifically what abilities she claims to have.
Okay, and I don't want to say employ, but has the FBI or any agency you've been involved in ever employed Allison Dubois or any other medium in helping gain information?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Overruled.
Gain information about the whereabouts or the circumstances surrounding the death of a children or anyone in particular.
Well, Mr. Pryor, when I said employ, I think I mean the same thing you do as utilize,
Okay,
not pay money to. I've never spoken with Allison Dubois. I've never requested her services. To my knowledge, nobody in this investigation requested her services. Many times these people come forward offering their services and offering what they claim to have seen.
so you are familiar that there are people out there who, as a professional occupation, claim to be able to engage in these spiritual exercises, for lack of a better word, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Sustained.
I cannot believe Pryor is
So,
bringing up
Would
Allison
it be fair to
Dubois.
say that if Chad Daybell placed himself out as someone who claims to be able to have these spiritual gifts, that in itself is not unusual? Would
This
you
is
agree
so
with that?
weak. Oh, this is so weak.
I don't believe it's common.
Okay. Your concern is that the number of text messages in reference to Tammy and the children, that's where you say that's where we potentially have a problem, correct?
Given what happened to Tammy and Tylee and JJ, yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, I noticed during your dissertation with all of your exhibits, on around 8/11, August 11th of 2019, it appears that there are some captions that were left out regarding a breakup between Lori and Chad Daybell. Do you recall that?
Hey, Harlan.
I believe those were included in the first testimony that I provided a number of weeks ago.
Okay, and those were not included in today's testimony, is that right?
They were not part of today's testimony.
Do you have a specific recollection of what was involved in the language that was used that you could read and provide us in terms of testimony regarding those emails?
Yes, I can certainly give you my best recollection. It won't be verbatim, and if you want verbatim, we'd have to go back to the exhibit that was used during my testimony previously.
And Judge, previously, the state and the defense stipulated to the admission of the Lori for Style um, uh, contents of that particular account. I'm holding in my possession Exhibit 7U. I'm going to ask that the court mark this as an exhibit and move for admission by, I don't know that the state has an objection to that.
The state does not have an objection. I just wanted to clarify which ones.
Very well. We'll get that marked for you, Mr. Pryor, and then.
Thank you, Judge.
Can you clarify what's in 7U?
Judge, it's a content of approximately 4 text messages between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell dating from 8/11 of 2019.
All right, Exhibit 7U is being marked and will be admitted.
Thank you. Judge, may I have the court's permission to publish?
Yes,
And it might take me a minute, Judge.
So I definitely have heard of police departments using mediums, maybe even contracting with them. I was curious about what this FBI agent would say about whether they use them, but he said no.
For more than a minute.
But even if they did, do they consult with mediums to then create an outcome, right? And is it just to send them in a direction? I think that they probably use mediums a lot like they use lie detector tests. It's not admissible in court, right? They can it's not gonna they're not gonna put a medium on the stand and say, yes, I knew for sure.
Judge, if we could start publishing.
all right, we will.
Just like a lie detector test is not admissible in court.
No, officer, I apologize. Agent, line 856 talks about from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow, the next 2 days will be torture. Do you see that?
I do.
Then there's a comment from Chad, makes a comment, and could you read that thankfully?
Thankfully, I will be alone most of Wednesday and beyond.
Okay, and then we go to line 854. Are these there's no text messages that are in between each of these, is that correct?
So in the iCloud, there can be. So in between 856 and 854, Lori Vallow could have gotten a text from a friend about lunch. And so they're just arranged and given a line number based on the date and time. So that's how this works.
Okay, so the time on the first one, 856, is at 9:56. The 854 would be the next correspondence from Lori Vallow to Chad, correct?
Yes.
And if you could read that entire text message starting with the word is.
Is that what he wants? For me to sit around waiting for you endlessly and you miserably wasting time? It just doesn't feel right! Exclamation point.
Okay. Now, you talked about the manipulation that was engaged in these, many of these, and you said, use the word many, from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell. Is this an example in your mind of Lori Vallow again manipulating Chad Daybell?
Absolutely. It was a two-way street. Lori Vallow would manipulate Chad Daybell and vice versa.
Okay, and Chad's manipulation would be talking about the religious knowledge that he claims to have in this vast wisdom. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. So on two levels, we have manipulation, at least according to you. We would have manipulation because someone's claiming to have some religious knowledge and espouses that by trying to impress Lori Vallow with that vast religious knowledge, correct?
I think it's more than knowledge. I think it's direction.
Okay. And then in Lori's case, this is manipulation and trying to get Chad to do what she wants him to do, correct?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. Okay. And Judge, could we unpublish at this point to like move to the next slide?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, and then if we could publish again.
Go ahead.
And then again on 811, it talks about Chad to Lori Vallow, I'm frustrated. I'm sorry, honey. And then let's go to line 843, which appears to have occurred at about the same time the first text. And if you could read line 843, starting with you.
You can't just keep tearing my heart out. I really can't take it anymore. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. And then let's go down to line 841 and start with reading that one for me.
What about the past 2 days? I didn't even get to talk to you on your birthday. I'm clearly not a priority. I just don't want to be so sad all the time and do heartbroken.
And again, in your professional experience with dealing with this case, is that another instance where Lori Vallow may be trying to manipulate Chad Daybell?
Certainly.
Thank you. And Judge, if we could unpublish again.
Yes.
And let's publish again, Judge. Okay. And then if you would read line 840.
If you really loved me, you wouldn't want that either.
Okay. And then Chad Daybell responds, that was from Lori Vallow to Chad, correct?
Yes.
And then 2 minutes later, Chad discusses that he couldn't have talked. The girls were there. And then he expresses his true love for Lori Vallow, correct?
Yes.
And then if you would be so kind, two minutes later at 10:15, Lori Vallow texts Chad Daybell. And if you could just read the entire line starting with you.
You should give all of you love and your attention to your wife and family. I'm just a distraction. Go have fun with your family. I really do want you to. I just can't be in the way anymore. If things change, then we can talk. But we have nothing until things change anyway.
And once again, I don't
Very
want to keep
manipulative.
reiterating this, but this is another example of Lori Vallow attempting to manipulate Chad Daybell. Would you agree?
I would.
Okay. And it seems a little bit final. And it seems as if that the suggestion here is on 8/11 of 2019 that there's a breakup between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Judge, we can unpublish this.
All right.
Please remember to hit the thumbs up. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here.
All right. That concludes cross.
That's all he had. So all he had
Let me
was
redirect.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm
you use
sorry.
psychic mediums, we use psychic mediums. And manipulation. Yeah, Chad's done for.
Your Honor, I would request permission to publish from 183B the printout of the PowerPoint. I can use the drive if necessary.
All right, we'll get you the exhibit on the drive.
I mean, I have to say, I honestly thought that Pryor was going to try to do a much more annoying but hard-hitting cross-examination, but that was pretty
Agent Hart, you were asked about manipulation by Lori Vallow from counsel. Do you recall that?
I do.
Through your investigation, did you also find manipulation by Chad Daybell?
I did.
Did you find that manipulation around the same time of the breakup?
I found it throughout the entire course of the investigation.
And again, through the investigation and based on your review, who would determine someone was dark?
Chad Daybell.
Who would determine if someone was a zombie?
Chad Daybell.
Who would determine?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's going beyond the scope of cross-examination.
Overruled.
Who would determine death percentages?
Chad Daybell.
Yeah, Chopper. I've seen a few different situations where medium
And Your Honor, I would request permission to just publish one page of the slide, but to print it out for ease.
Yes, you may publish the printed version on the Elmo if you'll identify what it is when you do that.
Yes, it is slide 18 from the printed version of Exhibit 183B.
like major cash rewards have been offered to come up with a specific answer to a specific question that would could only be answered by a medium and no one's ever done it. I'm on the fence about mediums. I'm going to
Agent
be honest
Hart.
with you.
Who is the one that indicates there is a plan being orchestrated?
Chad Daybell.
And do you see the reference in there to the children?
I do.
Do you know where Tammy Daybell's body was located when she was pronounced dead?
Tammy Daybell's body was located in the bedroom in their home.
Where were the bodies of Tylee and JJ located?
Tylee and JJ were both located on the pasture property of the residents.
Look at Chad. He's very
was that?
tense.
The residents of who again?
Chad Daybell.
He is very tense.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. That will conclude the testimony then
you
of
should-
Agent Hart.
I'm really glad that the state kept pressing on where was Tammy found dead? Where were the kids found dead? He looks like he's tied up in knots. He looks like he's trying to crouch in on a stomach ache.
Does the state have any additional witnesses to call in its case in chief?
We do not, Your Honor.
The state rests.
All right, so has the state rested at this time?
Judge, if we may have a brief sidebar.
Yes.
Uh-oh, brief sidebar. Uh-oh. They may not rest. They may call another witness. Ooh. Okay. While they're doing this brief sidebar, I want to show you something else. Very, very well, just see what you all think about this. The top picture is Tammy Daybell with Emma Daybell next to her at the time of Tammy's death, around the time of Tammy's death. This is what Emma Daybell looks like now, you guys. Literally, this is a picture of Emma Daybell from her work website where she works. Do you see this? Emma Daybell then, Emma Daybell now. Emma Daybell then, Emma Daybell now. She does look better, but it's a little weird. Is that not a little weird? When she was in the body cam with Chad when he was getting arrested, she talked about it may be touched up, Rachel, but it's literally taken directly from the school website where she works. Here, I'll show you. See, this is a school website where she works. That's the picture. She works at the same school where she worked when her mom died. Same school, Johnny. Where they worked together. So I'm just saying, it's a little weird. And in the body cam footage or the car cam footage in the car when Chad was being arrested, Emma is talking to him and she says that she's talking to Lori on a regular basis and putting money in Lori's commissary. Lori wrote texts and emails about how she met the kids and how they all got along great. Yep, she's the one that stuck out the tongue behind the reporter. I mean, it's yeah, that's right. Baby son forever. That really did happen. That really did happen. It is creepy. I mean, so just you take all of that behavior together and you take what she said. What was the quote from her interview that I said yesterday? The quote from her interview, let me find it. See if I I must have deleted it. I have to keep making I download so much stuff, you guys, that I'm constantly having to delete stuff, and then sometimes I delete stuff that I want again.
All right, we just had a sidebar to discuss some scheduling matters. At this time, I had inquired from the state if the state had another witness to call at this time or whether the state had concluded its case in chief. Ms. Blake?
The state does not have any additional witnesses. The state rests.
All right, the state is now rested. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in terms of our scheduling, that is going to conclude the evidence portion for today. We did not provide lunch today, believing we'd end here early. However, before you leave, you'll be delayed a little bit while the jury commissioner is going to just talk to you about a little additional information and scheduling at my direction. And so we will take up those matters with you shortly. And at this time, then we'll take a recess. And then if the parties wish to come back on the record for any motions outside the presence of the jury, we can do that as well. So we'll take our recess at this time and let the jurors be excused to the jury room. All right.
And with that, the state rests. And I don't think that I'm going to stick around to hear the, kind of housekeeping matters that they're going to do. It doesn't sound like they're going to do them on the record anyway. But the state rests. And so my guess is that Pryor is going to come out the gate swinging. He's going to try to pack a punch. And she's going to try to pack a punch. He's going to try to pack a punch. And he has mentioned Emma a lot. He has mentioned Emma a lot in this case. He more than any of the other kids, far more than any of the other kids. And that's one of the reasons I've been bringing up Emma is these, really distasteful things that she has done. She has basically glommed on to her dad's story from the very beginning and just taken it hook, line, and sinker and carried on that mantle and became friends with Lori and putting commissary in her thing and making faces. And then her husband is putting up, as soon as the kids are recovered from their father's backyard, he's putting up this incredibly disgusting, tasteless ad, right? So that's who's going to be, probably, in my estimation, going to be the first witness on behalf of Chad. I highly, highly doubt that Chad is going to testify in his own defense. It would be very stupid because then he would be subject to cross-examination, and I highly doubt that he would hold up in cross-examination. So it'll be very interesting. And it is Thursday today. I do think they do plan to come back tomorrow. So we'll see. We'll see how many witnesses they're able to get through tomorrow or prior. And like I said, I believe that this case will go to the jury next week. I can't. I'm sure that Pryor also has experts, at least one or two that he's going to try to bring on to counterbalance some of the expert stuff that has been brought out by the state. But I just find it hard to believe that this case won't be with the jury by the end of next week. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. So in the meantime, I will be here scheduling new lives to cover this trial. It's been a long time in the making, and we'll see. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you all for being wonderful in my chat. Very intelligent. I appreciate. I hope you all know how much I appreciate you. I really, really. I wish there was a way for me to express how much I appreciate each and every one of you coming up into my chat and talking to me while I watch these trials. It means so much to me. I enjoy all of your personalities, all of your different stories, all of your quirks, all of your I just appreciate you. I really, really do. each and every one of you, and I just want you to know that, and I appreciate the appreciation that you showed to me. Real so much. It just means so much to me. So I just want you to know that. Yeah. And I really like it being a place where people can just be adults and yes, and have a sense of humor, but not a cruel sense of humor. There's just I'm sorry you're about to hear me cry, but if there's one thing I cannot stand is cruelty. Hey, Music City Mom. I cannot stand cruelty. And I just love that you guys are not cruel. You're not a cruel. You're not a cruel bunch of people. So thank you for that. And don't mind me. Don't mind me, really. I'm okay. Stop. I'm sorry. It's my bad. My bad. Let's end on a happy note. And remember that there were once three wonderful people called Tylee, JJ, and Tammy. Okay. And that's why we're here. Let's also not forget Charles Vallow. That trial will be, if that trial is televised, I will definitely stream it. Because in all honesty, I feel like Charles was the start of all this, and he really tried. He really tried to stop all of this from happening. And no one listened to his outcry because of Lori, right? So just remember that. And I will see you all soon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. She definitely did, Chopper. All right. Yeah, and also Chopper, Charles was very successful. He made a lot of fucking money. So did Joe Ryan. So she chose this loser fucking, sorry, I'm getting mad now. Anyway, all right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Love you too, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.